Zinn, and I'm the Associate Director of the Carsey-Wolf Center, which sponsors the programming here at the Pollock Theater. And it is my great delight to welcome Louis Leterrier, the director and executive producer of the new Netflix series, Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want us to start first with the genesis of this project. So can you tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be involved in extending the Dark Crystal universe?
When I was 10 years old, I went to see the Dark Crystal in a French movie theater. I didn't know what I was going to see. I was tricked by the name Jim Henson, so I thought it would be, oh, this lovely movie. My parents dropped me off in this movie theater, picked me up 2 hours later, rolled up in a ball, completely scared and shattered, and it changed my life forever. And it's the movie that shaped my eye, my really creative eye. Right. And it's a movie that stayed with me. Not that I was obsessed with it, watching it all the time, but in a sense, it always came back. It's the sort of movie that was on TV all the time, and then was big on video. Yeah, it was never very successful in a movie theater, but it was very successful on videotape and laserdiscs and every iteration. And then you see it's the movie that it's like Tubular Bells is to CDs or discs. It's the Dark Crystal, so they and it was always there, always present. And then when I was doing a movie called Clash of the Titans, I was watching it a lot. I was asking my crew to watch it, and we're doing screenings of it because I said, this is how you do creatures right, and this is how you do a world right, and create a world right, and textures and patina and all that stuff. So I was watching it. So after I was done with Dark Crystal and it was successful, when you have a successful movie in Hollywood, they say you can meet everyone in Hollywood. And I said, I just want to meet one studio that I've never met. I've met pretty much everyone. I've never met the Jim Henson company. I never met Brian Henson, Lisa Henson, the Henson daughters, everyone. So I had a meeting with them, not to do anything about Dark Crystal, but just to ask them questions and how they did that. And then Lisa Henson said, well, we've been trying to do a sequel to the Dark Crystal, and we haven't cracked it yet, but would you like to try it? And I said yes, and then I kicked myself. I was like, wow, you're such an idiot. What you say yes, you're going to ruin it. You're stupid Frenchman. And so it took a long time to develop it, and really I was trying to crack the script. The script was never that great. It's tough because the Dark Crystal, the movie, I'm sure you know it, there's a definite ending. It's a big exclamation point at the end. You're like, oh, let's restart it. No, it was tough. It was a hard thing. But doing research, I was asking a lot of questions, so we had to create almost the story of what led to the movie. Yeah. And I said, but this is interesting. This is much more interesting than what we're supposing will happen afterwards. Why don't we do this? And we said, everybody was in agreement with me. But we realized that we didn't have. It would be tough to do it in 3 movies, let alone 1, And so we said, well, we need to change mediums, and that's when we realized that was 8 years ago. This what I'm telling you. So, well, I mean, 6 years because of the development, and then there was the rise of Netflix and the real rise of Netflix with the House of Cards and all the other shows, and so we took it to them and to them only, and because we knew they would be crazy enough to possibly say yes to. So we had one shot. We were the Luke Skywalker of the Death Star. We were like, okay, we'll do everything. 8 years of work to do one thing, and then we did it, and they said yes. So yeah.
And it's amazing. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, I was interested in the question of why it's a prequel, and you've answered that really well. That it just seems like there's so much to fill in terms of that world. So, but I'm also interested in that subtitle. Why did you choose to go with Age of Resistance?
Because we started with Age of Rebellion, but Star Wars had taken years. and then it's obviously a political statement. So we were like, yeah, I mean, resistance makes sense. It's what's happening these days. This is not so far. It's a fable, but like every fable, it talks about our world, the world well, our world now, but the world then. It's in a sense, it's funny. I mean, it's funny. It's terrifying. Jim Henson's nightmare is our reality today.
Right.
He was supposing this would happen with the ruling class crushing the little people, the world dying, etc., etc. That's a world he took. I mean, he was, in the 80s, the world was doing slightly better, but not as great as, he was aiming for that, but he would have never guessed that 37 years later, the show would be, his movie would be so current.
Yeah, so incredibly prescient.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested with the subtitle in that final speech that the Chamberlain, that voiceover speech he makes in this episode that we've just watched. And there's that moment where he says, even if Rianne talks, none will believe. They'll shun him, cast him out. How can they not? To believe that him is not to believe themselves.
Can you do it in Chamberlain's voice now?
No.
With the,
No. I had to fix the grammar in there. I just couldn't do it. But,
I know, yeah.
But I wonder if you can talk a little more about, to believe him is not to believe themselves. Like what's going on there?
Frankly, if you keep watching, especially, and this I'll answer question. The show is so well written. The dialogue. I mean, our writers are incredible writers, and they really sometimes hit you with sentences that become so you cannot unhear them.
Yes.
Later in episode 2, Chamberlain says, that's what I do. I plant lies and watch them become truths. And which is like my favorite. That's my favorite. It's so perfectly real, know, and that's who Chamberlain is. And if you think about it, like he's the evil guy, but he's also the one he's the most cunning, and in a sense, that's the beauty of this thing. It's all about shades of gray. It's not the evil guy that just wants destruction. He's the evil guy that eventually, later in the season, will want to defend the Gelfling. He needs them. He knows that you need the lower class.
You need the little people.
You need the little people in order to stay on top. Without the little people, then it becomes a problem. So yeah, it's for this, the subtitle, the dialogue, everything. If you turn off the image and listen to the thing, it's very modern and very much political. And it was on purpose. I mean, you heard him. He says, "Sad, so sad," for a reason. It's like it's just we did that on purpose. But it's sort of like it goes over some people, and that's what I wanted to do. I have we're talking about it in the green room. We're talking. I have many kids, too many kids. I have kids ranging from 18 to a month old, and I have we always struggle finding a show. I mean, I wouldn't show this to my 2-year-old, but we always have a struggle finding shows that we can all enjoy together. There's, and this is, you're laughing. It's not exactly. I'm a terrible father, but I remember seeing Star Wars, for example, where we were all, my father, my mother, they were enjoying the filmmaking and the vistas, and I was enjoying and I was loving the story of these heroes. So that's what I wanted to do, is to do something where the kids will enjoy the visuals. There's some cute stuff, there's some scary stuff. And then the parents will be like, I know what he's talking about.
There's political allegory.
I read it on Twitter yesterday.
Devastation going on, yeah. Good. Well, shifting gears a little, I want to back up and talk a little bit more about that collaboration with the Henson family. So what was it like working with the Henson family, and particularly working with some of the artists who worked on the original Dark Crystal with the Froud family?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Henson family, I don't know if you guys know where the Henson studio is in LA. I mean, basically it's on La Brea, and there's like a big pyramid. So, and it's this wonderful studio. It used to be Charlie Chaplin's studio. So you get Charlie Chaplin's footsteps on the floor and then his signature and stuff. So it's an amazing place. So you walk in, it's quite magical. On top of that, it's like it's a recording studio. So that's where they recorded We Are the World and stuff like that. So you always have like, hey, Paul McCartney, hey, Justin Bieber. I mean, literally, like every day you've got like, everybody's there walking. It's kind of a weird college of creation. It's kind of interesting. It's beautiful, made out of bricks. So, but it's really, it's a special place because it's sort of like a bubble suspended in time. It's kind of this weird, because there's a strange, obsolete essence that exists, that where puppetry exists, and they keep maintaining it, but they also are creating crazy computers and stuff like that. So they are true artists, the Henson and what they call the Creature Shop, which is this hole in the wall thing in Burbank where they create all the puppets, the actual puppets. But like, there's lots of stuff that you wouldn't know. Like, sometimes you walk in there and there's like, whatever, Tony the Tiger from, because they're building stuff. They're building lots of stuff all the time, and so that's the Henson family, and they're great. They're keeping the memory, the legacy of their father alive, and they really are pushing really, really hard to keep puppetry alive and developing it in a different way. So that's the Henson family. Now the Froud family. So Brian Froud and Wendy Froud, well, they weren't Wendy and Brian Froud then, they were Wendy and Brian, two people that worked with Jim Henson. Right. They fell in love on the original Dark Crystal and had a baby called Toby, and they all worked together, but Toby, before Dark Crystal, was the baby in Labyrinth. So this whole family of, I mean, they're as strange as their drawings. When you go and visit them, I went and visited them in Dartmouth. I mean, first of all, everybody's like this tall and I'm like a giant. So I walk into their little, 400-year-old house and I'm like, ow, ow, ow. I can barely walk through their stuff. And everything is old and dusty, but they keep creating, they're amazing, they're beautiful, they create, and they just like, they create this, they keep creating this art, and they live in the middle of nature in Dartmouth, where they believe fairies and trolls exist, and so they take you on walks, and they're like, look at this rock with that moss. That was my inspiration for the mystic and this and that and this. And it's really, and they're amazing people. So it was important for me when coming back to this world that we were using the same DNA, and on top of the technique, that the people that did it, I never expected Brian Froud. I thought that Brian Froud would be our guide and be like, yeah, I'll show up sometimes. I'll give you. I knew Toby was with us, but I was like, I wasn't expecting Brian to be that involved. But he stayed on every day. Same thing with Wendy, and they came in, and literally Wendy, she was at one point. You see episode 1, no, you don't see it yet, but in episode 2, there's like a huge giant forest, and we build these enormous sets, and everything was alive in those sets, and you had creatures and everything. So at one point after shooting in this forest over and over again, we ran out of new creatures because I wanted stuff. So I was like, we've seen this creature 6 times now. We need new creatures. She was like, no problem. And she came in and took all the bits and bobs of like stuff that fell on the ground, and she was creating creatures, like 2 creatures every day. Like, and that stuff is absolutely amazing. The stuff she was creating. They're different people. They're just like they work, they think differently, and they're
puppet magicians. Yeah.
I mean, and they create things that are iconic with like 2 things, like there you go. Oh yeah, look at this table. You twist it this way. It looks like eyes, and that's
it has a personality.
Exactly. Yeah, and you have personality. Yeah. So there's a rock. There's a rock at one point, a moving rock at one point, and it was like, yeah, it was written a moving rock. It's like, yeah, I'll make it work, and he created this really iconic creature out of something that was on set that we'd walk by. I walked by 10 times. I didn't think about it. It's like, if you look at this, and you twist it this way, and I was like, it's the most. It's like you cannot unsee this thing. It's like, I want this to be a creature in my dreams, or sometimes nightmares. Yeah,
That's fabulous. Well, that ties in nicely to the fact that, as we talked about backstage, this is part of a series that we're doing on special effects, and particularly on the role of craft in special effects.
Yeah.
And so I was interested to hear you talk a little bit about puppets as a special effect, and what's the appeal of puppets? Why use puppetry instead of any other technology? What are puppets good for?
Nothing. I mean, honestly, and Brian Fred would tell you the same thing. Puppets they cannot do anything. They're terrible. But handled by the right people. I mean, I love puppets. I mean, I'm obsessed with puppets. But it's true that it's the most difficult way of making anything. It's just asking somebody to handle a puppet. But it's what's exciting. It's just they cannot grab anything. Like, obviously, you don't see their legs. You can only frame them from here to there. So I'm directing, but I'm also camera operating, so handheld and Steadicam and doing all that stuff. It's really hard to frame out the puppeteers and frame out the top of the studio, the stage. So I was like doing all that stuff all the time. Then I got used to it, and it's like it became sort of like a language. But it's so hard, and at the same time, it's so incredibly joyous. It's like working, like we all work together as a team, and as you say, craft. I'm in love with craft. I think I became a filmmaker thanks to Star Wars and Dark Crystal because of the books, sort of like the making of books, how they explain how they did that stuff. I was like, I didn't really care about becoming a filmmaker, like the ego of becoming a filmmaker. I just wanted to make stuff, And with Dark Crystal, the beauty of it is that you come in the morning and obviously we've created the whole thing, the set is built and everything out of polystyrene and stuff, and eventually it becomes this, but it's the only movie, only show, only thing I've ever done where in the morning we all look at each other, like, the crew is like, as many people as people here in this theater, and we're like, okay, today we have to do a battle scene or like a love scene or something, and people are like, okay, so we'll start with this, and you build it together slowly but surely, and normally on a movie you sort of like he ends up just being between two actors and the director and camera people and the sound person. It's a small group, and then the rest of the people, on their phones and doing that. In this instance, everybody was busy all the time. If you were not busy doing your job, being a light person or something, or a PA bringing tea or something, I was sending you under the stage and moving everything was alive on the set. So Wow. But it's the thing where we have to find those moments of truth thanks to craft and not actors in a wig or something. Right. So it's a very different thing. But once you get it, and it's rare that it's rare. You're going to go to get to the perfect take, or what I think is the perfect take, and then you get tired, and there's a steep decline. So it's almost like a moment that you better get right. Me as a camera operator, I better get right, because it's sort of like you work really, really, really hard. It's like Iwo Jima, when they brought that flag up, it feels the same thing with puppets. Like, we got it. Okay, boom, and then move on.
There's a drop off.
Well, it's like the myth of Sisyphus. The guy that brings out the boulder and then he runs. It's the same thing. It's exactly this. You do it. In this case, because it was a TV show, I was doing 6,500 shots a day. Just imagine this.
Rolling boulders.
65 boulders a day. Yeah, exactly.
So I understand in preparation for this, you attended puppetry school.
Well, what I call puppetry school. Yeah. Well, I knew nothing. I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be easy, and it was so hard. So I bought puppets online and did my thing, and then also watched them build the puppets, understanding how a puppet, because there's so much. So obviously you got one puppeteer. You have to understand the puppet character is minimum 3 people. So a gelfling will be 3 people. One person in the head, on the left hand with a rod, and then another assistant on the right hand, and then a third person on a RC controller, like a plane controller, but that's kind of like modified for all the eye movements and the stuff like that, you know, and the ears. So that's 3. But when you have a Skeksis, that's like 4, 5, 6 sometimes. 6 people. When sometimes you have the tail and 2 sets of arms, then it's like people hiding everywhere. And I needed to understand that because I was like, but how do you direct? I mean, it's hard to direct one actor, let alone like 6 people.
A whole
like,
bunch of people.
Okay, tail, I want you to be like really expressive, you know. Your mother has just died, you know. and no, but if really you're like, literally I was directing arms. I was like, and that's when, you know, little arm on the left, you go there, and little right, you know, big arm on the right, and everybody has to work in sync. So I needed to understand how a puppet is made and how it's sort of like activated and puppeteered to understand how to direct them, you know. So, and that was the beginning, because then afterwards I was like, okay, good, I understand. Now let's make it all new and different, and let's break everything you've done before, and let's do camera movements, and you guys are going to run and fight. And I don't know if some of you guys have watched the whole show, but episode, 5 on, it's crazy, like battles and car chases, and I mean, it's like, you know, I can't help myself. Yeah, it's like, I do bangs, I do boom. I like when it goes boom. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So I was also interested in hearing about the process of directing in terms of the relationship between the puppeteers, and you were saying, you know, it's actually a cluster of puppeteers, and the voice actors. So, you know, do those people have contact with one another in creating the character? Is it all mediated through you? I would never
let an actor be, you know, destroyed by a puppeteer. No, they don't. Some did. It came later. Like Taron Egerton, who plays Rian, came on set because he was one of the first ones to be cast. But it took us. We needed to edit the footage, and while I was editing, that's when I was casting doing the voice cast. So some of them hadn't met, and then it was sweet. We had a premiere in London, and Natalie Emmanuel, who plays Deet and Missandei in Game of Thrones, she met her puppeteer. She had 2 puppeteers, and they were like, everybody was crying. It was like so beautiful. Like, you made me look so beautiful. And it's really it's the character is fully realized when the voice comes on, you know. I mean, obviously, it's normally when you do an animation project, you would do the voice first, and then afterwards, you know, the animators would sing the thing, and then you redo a second version, and then you perfect the thing. Here, he was pretty much like straightforward. I was directing the puppeteer, the main puppeteer, to do the voice and to do everything. Then I was editing that, and that was giving us a direction, and then afterwards that direction was tweaked, you know, matched but tweaked by the actor. And I mean, we spent so many hours. I mean, everything takes forever. You know, that's the thing. It's like we're talking about. It's like it's the first and last time you'll ever see this. It's so complex, so expensive, so insane. Like it's the swan song of this amazing art, and we did it. I'm so lucky that we did it. That Netflix allowed us to do it right and to do it big and to go out on
all this detail.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like it. You know, it's a big. You know, we took a big bow and we're like, "Thank you very much, world. Puppetry is out." Mic drop. It doesn't work in a world now. In a world where now you can do everything CG. I mean. I love CG. I think it's missing. There's something missing in CG. There's something where I'm like, I mean, I've done so much CG, full CG characters, Hulk, etc. But I'm like, I don't know. It's not completely clicking for me. I think the human brain is smarter than the machine creating the CG. Whereas the puppets, you know, it's. You know, it looks weird and kooky, and the voice flaps differently than a regular voice, than a regular mouth. But it's like your brain sort of like is used to it. But you know, generations of people, you know, suffering through horrible puppet shows have made us accept that reality in a sense.
It's an abstraction that our brains know how to read.
Yeah, we accept. Right? You accept it. You know, it's like I watch. You know, as a Frenchman, you watch Guignol. You know, which is this like punching Punching Judy, and sort of like you were like your parents force you to watch it, and eventually you're like, I kind of enjoy it, you know. But unfortunately, it's such a. I mean, you can do small stuff, and there'll be others. You know, there'll be small things. You know, there'll be other attempts to into puppeteering. But I think the best match is sort of like using puppetry as in addition to real actors, and it's like the nice blend of every technique, you know, and every craft. I mean, it's great that you guys are doing a visual effects, I mean, a special effects craft series, because it's sort of like, I think today's world with Dark Crystal coming back in the forefront of this, it can, you know, I mean, the next movie I'm making, the next shows I'm making, shows I won't do that, but like the next movies I'm making, I'm doing a big sci-fi thing now, or fantasy thing. I know I'm using every technique, CG, actors, puppetry, makeup, all that stuff. I think craft is like, that's how you, as a filmmaker, and well, as an audience member, I like to be tricked. I like when there's like a different, it's a mixed bag of tricks. It's like, whoop, oh, puppetry, oh, whatever, makeup, or real CG, and you don't know when CG starts and you know, or the actor. I think it's interesting when you get that stuff.
Yeah, I was very interested in that with this show, because obviously you are using quite a bit of CG in this, and I wonder if you can talk about a place in this show where we might be surprised at the ways in which you're blending CG and practical effects.
Well, obviously, sometimes, you know, when the final shot, when Deet comes out of the tree, you know, and you see the whole world out there, obviously that's a CG. Well, she's real, the tree is real, some of the tree is real, but then
there's an extension.
But there's an extension and the whole world, yeah. So that's very, I mean, it's very obvious, it's well done, but it's like, it's although it's elements and real elements patched together in a CG world, it's a CG, it exists in a computer, the full thing. But there are some stuff like Deet, for example. Deet, her eyes, you know, Deet, the green girl, you know, with everything, her eyes were too big to put mech in it, so she couldn't close her eyes.
She couldn't blink. Cave eyes,
She has those giant cave eyes, so she couldn't blink. So all her blinks and basically expressions are, she didn't have a remote person, Deet. So everything, it's not full 3D, it's 2.5D. When I call 2.5D, it's photo mapping of her eye, but it's CG well done, you know, and sort of like it's sort of like seamless handoff. The tongues of the Skeksis, tongues are CG, and
oh, they're tongues.
the tongues, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Deet's eyes are so soulful and so
soulful,
believable.
yeah.
Like they're really important to the
But like
show.
for example, Brea's eyes are so well done, and that's real. That was the same puppeteer. She's like a freak puppeteer. She can do everything herself. This lady, Alice Deneen, and she has this. Basically, it's a Wii remote. You know the Wii remote. And it's like a Wii remote that she does like this. And she can move the eye and change the expression. And Brea is so expressive, and that's real. And what we did with the CG is obviously you can do whatever you want with CG. I mean, you know, today you replace Will Smith's face with young Will Smith's face. You can do whatever you want with CG.
But do you want to?
But you want, no, but I mean, you can if you're angry. But my thing was like, oh, don't go higher, better than Brea. We know Brea is the apex of what a puppeteer can do expression-wise. What Deet can only be matched to this level, and everything we were doing, all the CG walks and the stuff like that, were some in episode 2 you'll see some Gelfling walking around, Rianne jumping out of the castle, and all that stuff.
Right.
I mean, that stuff was CG, but like based on a puppet model, but when he hits the water, that was real. That was a puppet, you know, and the water was CG. So it's like I'm mixing tricks, so you never know what is real, what is not. So I think it's the best way for you filmmakers out there. It's just mix it. Just like I think, just the eye. To like the full CG, it gets old very. Also it gets old much faster than when you capture something for real on camera. Like The Dark Crystal, the movie, 37-year-old movie, it's kind of like, oldish, but watch a 37-year-old special effect movie, like the original Clash of the Titans is wonderful, but there's some stuff you're like, whoa. No, but it's like, but it's like Ray Harris is different, but like when you do like, if we watch a CG, like Avatar in 37 years from now, we'll be like, it looks, whatever.
More dated, yeah.
Well, it'll be like, I don't know, it'll be like CG, because the Moore's Law will just go, much faster, much higher, much faster, much better, until it's like completely, absolutely, mimics real life forever. But like, I think puppetry is sort of like locked in time. We pushed it as far as it can go, I think.
Right, right.
In this season. Maybe we can do another season. Push it even further. We can do further.
There's more story.
Yeah, more story.
Speaking of more story, so I think of this as one of those fantasy world building projects like Tolkien's Middle-earth. Why, what do you think the appeal is of the fantasy world for telling the kinds of stories you're trying to tell here, like the stories about environmental issues or about political issues? Why create fantasy worlds to do these things?
Because it's always been in our storytelling ways. I mean, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Gauls to Tolkien to fable has always been, and myths, and they've always been an allegory. They've always been our ways of understanding reality and big concepts and grasping religion.
It's the way of tackling
the Bible is a
issues.
great. It's like it's like you read stuff and you're like, oh, right, great. It's like we like big set pieces. The Bible is full of these, sort of like giant action set pieces. There, and that's the thing. So like we write stories to understand our world, and I also believe that as creatures, we're not intelligent enough to, make it all up. So it's sort of like somewhere, somehow, there's a unicorn running around, and I'm like, we're gonna find it. It's like I'm a true believer that there's a big unknown out there. It's not we're not mere mortals and just making up stories just to scare ourselves. But I think
these fantasy elements are out there.
Yeah, don't you think that's exciting? I don't know.
Well, and I'm also interested in the idea that, you were not only making a prequel to a film, but also there was a lot of sort of ancillary material out there on the Dark Crystal universe when you started this project, right? There were novelizations and graphic novels, and what was it like to sort of work in that world?
That was the beginning. When I started 8 years ago,
right,
there was
because
nothing.
This is gestating so long.
And I was like waiting, and then boop, 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 and I was like, don't take all the good stories, wait for us. But we sort of like, it was out of our research that these.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like these were literally, streams of storytelling that we were launching, and Lisa Henson or different people at the Henson Company were like, oh yeah, that's great. Let's do. I mean, it wouldn't hurt us. I mean,
right.
We didn't know we would have. We were trying. It was like a lab. It was a Dark Crystal lab. We were trying stories. We were like, well, let's launch this story and let's launch this story. When we realized that we weren't going to do, I was not interested in doing the sequel movie. We gave it to Image, and they did a comic book, and sort of like it was helpful. It was just like launching lots of stuff, and there's lots of stuff that people have not seen and will never see. Animatics, tests that we did with a CG Gelfling to see if it would work, just to prove ourselves it would never work. And it was not working. It was like they look exactly the same. It just doesn't feel the same.
Well, and some of that is in the making of.
Oh yeah, right. You see a little bit. You see a little bit, but it's funny. It's fine, and it's like pretty horrific. But like when you watch, because we did a little short film, we did a 5-minute short film. That's what Netflix in the beginning. Netflix was like, are you sure you don't want to use CG? I was like, no, there's no CG. And they say, well, okay, try with one puppet, one CG, and do a chase between a Skeksis and a CG Gelfling. And I did that, the 5-minute short. And it's fine. It's like it didn't rock my world.
But the contrast is so, so striking that
you can do whatever.
Skeksis are so textured.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just the texture of it, and it was not the greatest Skeksis. We just did him really quickly. But I don't know. It's just I feel like it's weight also. There's no weight. CG has no weight, and you can add weight. I mean, you can add weight to your CG elements, but still, it doesn't feel the same way. Like the hair doesn't. It's just. It's just everything feels a little bit too perfect, more human than human, more puppety than whatever. It's like a little bit too much,
Right.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a couple of details of the episode we've just watched, and the first thing I'm wondering about is the way it opens. That you've got this opening voiceover, which echoes the opening voiceover of the original film. Which I was looking at some of the excerpts of the original script that are online, and they refer to that opening voiceover as the classy narrator. So the idea that
the original movie.
In the original film, yeah. So the idea that Joseph O'Connor, the person who's doing that opening voiceover, he's the classy narrator.
Oh, he's classy.
Yeah, he's so classy. So the idea that in this you've chosen to replace the classy narrator with Sigourney Weaver.
She's
you talk
classy.
a little bit about she's so classy?
What are you saying?
Can you talk a little bit about the desire to retain the voiceover and to use Sigourney Weaver for that moment?
The show was not starting on this, and that was a Netflix when we started. I was almost done editing the whole show, and they were like, I think people will be, and they did like some tests amongst friends, and they were like, people are a little lost in the beginning, because the show was starting with the Skeksis walking in, and we knew there might be a voiceover, but we were like, I wanted to drop the audience in the middle of, like, start with the problem, start with the why now moment, the inciting incident, which is like, the crystal stops working, and you can have a voiceover saying, the Skeksis rolling class. So I wanted to, because they didn't want to make it they're evil, they're good. So they asked for a little prologue, and I didn't want to do your typical storybook opening with page turns and all that stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, how can I do it? And I was thinking, not do the map, the Game of Thrones map, but I was like, that's interesting to see, almost like a chess, like a little bit of a chess, a little tableau, and like a little bit of almost like an RPG game, get a Dungeons and Dragon thing. So I was like, okay, it'd be good to understand that. You see the symbols, you get used to it, and everything. And so we got the visuals right and everything. And then came time to cast it, and we could have gone with a classy big voice and everything, but I was like, let's change it. It's like a different world. It's a world. It's hope is still alive. Well, I mean, there's no problem. I wanted to put it in the Gelfling perspective and not the Skeksis perspective. The Skeksis don't, it was more, and that's why if you know the mythology of the Dark Crystal universe, what Sigourney is saying is not exactly the truth. Mm-hmm. It's a truth. It's like a version of the truth that the Skeksis want you to hear. And so I said, I want somebody a little, younger. I'd love a woman, and I thought of it's a classy lady, Sigourney Weaver, who happens to be my godmother, so it was very easy. I called her.
Really?
I was like, Siggy. Hey.
That's a good godmother.
Do you want a job?
To have.
I hear you have a problem.
I hear you have a classy voice.
Yeah, you have a classy voice, yeah.
Very nice.
And you're available. Oh. Yeah. And she's great. She's amazing. Sigourney, obviously, she's my godmother, but she, we've never worked. I would never be like, hey, Siggy, I've never done that in my life. But I was like, it'd be so fun to work with her on this, and if we get to do seasons 2, 3, 4, 5, she's going to be a character. She's the myth speaker.
The myth speaker, right?
So she is a character in the universe.
She's such an iconic voice. It's great.
Yeah, no, she's great. Yeah, and when she, like all her nature documentaries, her narration is soulful and beautiful, and she's very fast, too, which is good. I was like in and out.
Nice.
Boom, 2 takes, you're out.
Very, very useful. Well, and one of the things she's setting up there then at the beginning is the idea that instead of, in the film where you've just got 2 Gelfling who are completely separate from their cultures even, here you've created 7 different clans with different cultures. So can you talk a little bit about that process of creating a culture for each clan?
I mean, in a political society and everything. Well, that's very much, you know what it is? That's Lisa Henson. Lisa Henson and Hallie Stanford, her head of TV development, they created this incredible, rich universe as we were researching. Because it's funny, because there was nothing. There was some research, but not much. Brian Froud had sort of like redeveloped or sort of like expanded upon notes that he'd taken with Jim when writing the script, and created what we call the world of Dark Crystal, which is and some books about the stories, but the stories were the truths were conflicting. So we just went back and did kind of like almost like an archaeological study on the movie, and we're like looking at signs and recurring visuals, and we're like sort of like piecing stuff together, and we're like 3 is a very important number on Thra. Like everything is 3, 3, 3, 3, and then when's the next 3? Number? It's a 7, and you see like 7. You see a lot of. It's like very in the Great Conjunction drawing by Brian Froud, you get 7 planets, 7 suns, 7 planets. It's like very. The numbers were very clear to us, and we're like, okay, how do we do that? And then with the writers, we came up with, the fires of resistance and the Aureal, that system that just that's 7 branch star and all that stuff. Like it was fun. It was sort of like you grab a lot of elements and you piece together something, and you're like, oh, did they? Because it really makes sense when you think about it. And the reviews have been great on our show. People are like, the mythology is amazing, everything. We're like, yeah, we just like created out of stuff that they did almost naturally, like Jim Henson and Brian Froud did naturally. But I think it's sort of like Brian Froud is very big on astral geometry, and it's all like 3s and 7s, and or if you go that route, or if you go the other route, it's 2s and stuff. So it was interesting. It's like it's a mix of binary with the Skeksis and Mystic, and then a mix of like sort of like non-binary, 3s and 7s and everything. Yeah.
Well, it does make it so much more of a complicated political and social world that you can then use to ask these questions about resistance and needing to overcome cultural difference.
And again, it's always like never do black and white. Do always shades of gray. It's always better, and that's what we did.
So I want to talk a little bit about costume in both of these films. I know your mother was a costume designer, so the idea that costume is this formative experience for you. And I love the way that costumes operate in the original film, the idea that the Skeksis have this real investment in their clothing, and then there's that wonderful moment where the Chamberlain, the Chamberlain is stripped, and then he's restored his robes. And so can you talk a little bit about the use of costume in the series?
Well, yes. I mean, my approach to Dark Crystal, initial approach when I was a kid, and afterwards when I was working, was always like, look how great those costumes are. They make you understand who this character is, the Skeksis, based on his costume and how much jewelry he's had and what kind of jewelry he has, and the different, sort of like the chubby one, how many rolls he's got, and you see his like shirt about to pop, and it's really funny. So I knew the costume were important, but I didn't know how important it is to a puppet, because the body of the puppet doesn't have a body, it's got a costume. The costume is the body. So you cannot strip a puppet and there's nothing underneath. So it's like everything, and then the costumes have to be very light, so you cannot put real fabric. So all the fabric that you see are like simile fabrics. They look like rich velvets, but it's not a velvet. It's like this flocking thing. It's basically, it's like it's that foam, that insulating foam that you put in, but like a very thin layer, scratched and burned.
So it just doesn't weigh anything.
Yeah, it doesn't weigh anything, and then you add several layers, and then you put. It's all about transparencies and movements. Everything has to be real. Again, in Skeksis, there's like 2, maybe 3 people inside the costume, so you cannot see them. If you see the person inside, the persons inside, it sort of like ruins the trick. So it's very important to build this, and there's lots of foam. So the costume is very important. And then on top of that, there's something that is so important, especially nowadays with all the digital cameras. It's patina. It's breaking down the costume. And my mom is a really good costume designer. She's really tough. But she was like, oh, the patina, like wearing it down. And I was like, I never really understood. As a kid, it's really sad. I never had clothes of mine. I always had to wear clothes, for actors' clothes, and she's like, roll around in the dirt, And but she was like, I had like brand new shoes, and I had to like roll and sort of like, walking back from school, in the gutter. And I was like, hey, why do I have to do this? But I understood. And then she would wash it with tea, and she would break it down. I applied this, and then the frauds came in, and the frauds use a technique called fraud water, which is basically disgusting muck that they spray on it, and it sort of like adds like dirt, and then they burn it and they do stuff like that. The best thing that happened to us and the worst thing that happened to us, one day I was working all the time, because on top of this I was editing at night, and then one day I'm editing in London. It was like the hottest day in London. Sometimes you get like scorching, like horrible 100% humidity, sort of like 110 degrees. It happens once a year, but it's like horrible. And I'm editing, I'm like, windows open, and I hear beep, 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 this alarm that always went on. I was like, fire alarm. It's so annoying. I walk on stage to turn it off. The set is on fire. I mean, for real. And I'm alone. And all the puppets, it was like, for some reason, it was like the day where normally the puppets were in the creature shop, but this time they were all on set because we were doing the final battle. And I was like, no!
Save the puppets!
Save the puppets! Well, I was alone. I was like, Louis, what are you doing? The thing that's dangerous is that it's all polystyrene. When polystyrene burns, it becomes cyanide. So basically me going in was like, I could have died in 2 seconds. I was like, wow. Show or me, and you don't think about it. So I took my shirt, wrapped it around me, and then went in. And it was still on fire. The sprinklers had turned on and everything. And then I started bringing the puppets out one at a time, but it was raining on them and the smoke and everything. Eventually, before I went in, I called the fire department. They came in and they had X-ray. I forgot to. I drew the set because it was really complex. There was like a zigzag. I was like, you have to go. I know where the fire is. Go there. Go there. It was like really a strong fire. I was like, you have to go there. And I drew that stuff. They ran in. They have those camera X-ray, heat vision kind of thing. They see what they are. They came back out. Holy crap! There are kids everywhere. They looked at us. I was like, no, I forgot to tell you. It's puppets.
It's full of puppets.
And one guy came out. He's like, with an English accent, excuse me, is it the Dark Crystal? I was like, the guy was a fan. He's like, so the Chamberlain. He was looking straight at me. I was like, yeah, we're doing the Dark Crystal. Oh, that's awesome. Let's go back in. And they turned off the thing. The good thing about that day, the worst thing about that day, and the good thing about the day is that the puppets we thought they were ruined, but when we dried them, they were amazing. They were perfect perfectly distressed for the final battle. So when you look at the final battle, you'll see like all the puppets are like, ha! And Ryan is like, ha! But he looks amazing. It looks like, they actually, went to war. But it was the best thing. It's so like, you cannot age stuff enough, especially in the day of digital cameras in 4K, and we shot in 8K, and then it's gonna keep going into the K world, and it's gonna get like so perfectly defined that if you don't age material, it's going to look like straight out of a rack onto a set.
So your advice is just light it all on fire.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, I bet, yeah, no, but like, age stuff up, really do age stuff up, when you look at it, with your naked eye, you're like, did they go a little too far? But, the camera cleans up everything.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, I have one last question, which is,
Did you start a fire? No, I didn't.
No, not at all.
Everybody thinks so, but no. I didn't.
So you obviously have an affinity for remaking the products of the early 80s with doing...
Not on purpose. I did it once and they were like, yeah.
Clash of the Titans, doing Dark Crystal. So I guess I'm wondering,
which
are
one?
there other late 70s, early 80s projects that you're ready to take a crack at?
No. Those movies really, they define my life. I don't know, I just don't know these days. I don't know if kids these days, you guys, I don't know if you feel you're experiencing the same thing I experienced. I'm 46. In the 80s, every week or 2 weeks, whether I was in France or in America, there was something special that was coming out. Something like you were invited to a world that you never visited before. And it could be like a galaxy far, far away, or, Portland or somewhere where the Goonies are. And you're like, oh, well, it was like, and it was like, it defined my sensibility, but I think not only me. I mean, Comic-Con, like you walk the alleys of Comic-Con, you're like, all these people their lives have been changed by the movies of the 80s,
Right, by these iconic characters.
Yeah, and then obviously I did some Marvel. I started the MCU with the Marvel Studios and everything, and everybody at Marvel is like me. Like the 80s is it was a defining period for them. So the stuff that you see, like when you watch Marvel movies, you're like, it's very clear that this is like an homage to this or homage to that, or was influenced by this.
But that's the moment they're drawing on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you very much for coming, Louis.
Thank you.
This was really wonderful.
Thank you so much.